Now, today we're using watercolor paper, some color pencils, pencil, Sharpie marker, tape, and watercolor paints. Now, I have sort of old watercolor paints. They sort of mixed up, but we can still use them, okay? Now, to get things started, we're using a sheet of this watercolor paper. If you don't have watercolor paper, that's fine. Use the paper that you have, but we just don't want it to have lines on it, okay? So you can use printer paper. But this is my watercolor paper. And I'm going to tape it down so it doesn't move, and this will add a little bit of a border if I want to frame this later on, okay? And this is just regular clear tape. And I'm gonna tape it on the top here. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I want it to stick to my board. That holds pretty well. So I'm gonna do that to all the sides. Now, if you don't have tape, that's fine. You can just lay this flat on your counter or on your table so it doesn't move, okay? But what I like about taping it down is that it'll leave a little extra space on the sides of my drawing. I think that's long enough. Taping it down. And this is just regular, this is just regular office tape. Okay, so that's all taped down, secured. Next, let me bring this closer. Okay, so next we're going to start sketching out our drawing. So like I said, the inspiration for this reframing, black art, and art history, we're starting with Faith Ringgold's story quilt. Now, if you haven't heard of Faith Ringgold, she's a really amazing woman, African-American artist. She's still living today, making wonderful art. And her artwork, she paints on story quilts. Now, quilts, you can think of blankets that you put on your bed, but this is a story quilt is a special type of blanket. It's made of different squares, different shapes of cloth that have been sewn together. And on the middle of these blankets, she paints a story. She paints a story. So as we create this artwork, think about what's your story? What can you share with your friends or family? What can you share about yourself? What's special about you? And yeah, take ownership. Tell your own story, okay? So with that being said, our story, and when I say take ownership of your story, I mean your story, what you share about yourself may be different than what your teacher may say about you, and it may be different than what your adults may say about you or your family. So instead of thinking, oh, well, this is what my mom would say, or this is what my dad or sister or brother would say, what would you say about yourself? Okay, that's your story. So in this drawing of our story quilt, with these story quilts, they usually have a border. So it has a frame already. So we're going to draw out our own frame. Now with drawing this, think of a rectangle on the inside of your paper, okay? So when we're drawing this, you don't have to make your lines super straight because mine will not be super straight. Just try your best. And I'm drawing like a frame on the inside of my story quilt drawing. And this is a large rectangle. So now's the time, pick up your not your paintbrush, pick up your pencil and draw with me. Okay. All right, so there is our frame. There's the outside of our quilt. So now a quilt, a story quilt, it's made of different pieces of fabric that's been cut into shapes and sewn together. So now I'm going to draw my these different shapes to represent the different pieces of cloth. And I have squares here on the side. Now, if you want to be fancy and add your own shapes, that's fine, or you can follow along with me. Okay. And now I'll start with triangles. I'll leave that. And these don't have to be perfect lines. They don't have to be super straight. What I really like about Faith Ringgold's story quilts are they're full of color. She used lots of different colors. So for this drawing, make sure you have color pencils or crayons or watercolors to add lots of color to your drawing. Okay, so now we have our border of our story quilt. Next, I'm drawing another rectangle on the inside here. And what I love about Faith Ringgold's story quilts are she added words to them to help tell the story. So I'm drawing this rectangle on the inside, so I will have space to write my own story. So as you draw this, you can think about a story that you want to tell about yourself, something maybe fun happened or something that you learned and how you felt about what you learned. It's Black History Month, so you can share something new that you learned about Black history, a new fact. Yeah, and you can write it here. Okay, so now we have our border. We have our border of shapes. We have our frame to write in our story. Next, here I'm going to draw and pull from a story that Faith Ringgold has. And her stories, sometimes they were about herself, sometimes these stories were about historical figures, people from history, people from Black history like Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Dr. Maya Angelou. And if any of these names ring a bell, shout it out in the chat. I want to see what names or what historical figures you know from African American history. And sometimes she painted pictures of Dr. Martin Luther King. She had a story quote with him. And then sometimes she would paint story quotes, and it's not of a specific person, but of an idea. Like her one painting entitled Working Women. So it's a lot of women and in the streets of New York, and they had on different uniforms for the jobs that they worked at. So some of them were factory workers, some of them were teachers, and they were helping children cross the street. So she showed the stories of lots of different people, okay? But with her drawings were really fun. Some of them were of dreams that she had, and people were flying through the sky or dancing on the Golden Gate Bridge. And some of these stories were real and some were made up, obviously, like who can fly in the sky and, jump rope on the Golden Gate Bridge. But think about what fun stories you want to share. And when you're drawing this, don't feel pressured to think that, oh, it has to look super realistic. No, you draw in your own style, okay? So I'm going to pull from one of her stories, and it's called Tar Beach. And in this story, it was of her summer nights and dreaming of flying in the sky with her little brother, and I really loved it because people were flying, okay? So, with that being said, I'm going to draw one of her scenes from Tar Beach. Okay, so to get started, we're going to draw a bridge. Now, this bridge, it goes a little something like this. It starts off with a rectangle. Okay. And here we have some triangles. And with this story, Faith Ringgold was sharing about her childhood and her dreams that she had. And she made these into story quilts and then made a book out of it. So just like Faith Ringgold, you all can create your own stories with pictures and put it together and make a book. All right, so there is our bridge. And then next, from our bridge, here, let's add a little bit of an arch here. There we go. Okay, so next for our bridge, we have some buildings beneath. Now, buildings I really like because they just look like rectangles. So I'm going to draw some different rectangles here, and they're all going to be different heights. And some of them are skinnier. Some are taller. Some are wider. Okay, so we have our buildings underneath. And next, like I said, Faith Ringgold told a story with her story quilts. And this story quilt, she was dreaming of flying through the sky. Okay, so these stories, they don't have to be totally realistic. They can be made up stories. So she was flying through the sky, going to different places that she couldn't regularly go to. So here's a question. So, and you can share in the chat if you like. If you could fly, where would you go? If you could fly, where would you go? Okay. All right. So as you share in the chat, here we're going to draw the little girl flying through the sky. Okay. So to draw her body, think of a rectangle. Lots of different shapes here. Think of a rectangle. Now I'm going to show you how to draw one person, and then you can draw as many people as you like, okay? So here's the legs, and they're sort of bent. So it's straight line, diagonal line. And then here's the foot. Same here, sort of straight. And here's the foot. And for here, this is the back of her leg, the back of her knee, so it has a little bit of a curve, okay, for her calf. And this could be a he or she. It's up to you. Like I said, I'll draw one person, and then you can draw as many people as you like, okay? All right, now her arms, or his arms, they're stretched out. So we need some sleeves, right? There we go. Erase the corners there. And then we need her head. Now, Faith Ringgold did not draw all of her people, her story quilts, to be super realistic, okay? They're more cartoony. So I'm just gonna draw like an oval for the head, and then 2 lines going down for the neck. And then I'll add a little bit of a triangle here for a nose. Here's a dot for the eye. Okay, remember, her artwork was not super realistic. It was more cartoony. So if you want to add in more details to make it look realistic, you can, but you don't have to, okay? All right. Next, here are her braids. Her braids are flying through the air, and she has bows on them. So I'm adding these bows, and they look like little triangles. One, 2, 3, 4, and then this will be 5. Okay, and then I'm connecting them to her head. Now, if you're thinking, okay, if Faith Ringgold is such a great artist, why doesn't her artwork look super realistic? Why does it look like a cartoon? Well, because she wanted it to look that way. Okay, all artists have a different style, and that's fine. The artwork does not have to look super realistic and look exactly like the person or the thing for it to be great art. Here are the fingers. 2, 3, 4, 5. And the thumbs go on the inside, okay? So here's the thumb. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. And then she was wearing a really cute dress. So here is the waistband for her dress. And it has a bow on the back. Here are the ribbons from the bow. And I'll make her dress fly out a little more. Okay. All right. So I have my drawing. Now, if you want to add stars later on, we will. But now it's time to color, or paint. It's whatever you have. So here's my drawing. And I'm going to start with color pencils because I want to add color pencils, which are made of wax. Color pencils and crayons are made from wax. So, let me back here. They're made from wax, so if we use them first, we can color in all those fine, really cool details and then go over it with the our watercolor paints, okay? So I'm going to make sure it's all cleaned up and nice here. Okay, so I want to add stars to the sky, okay? But with this, I'm going to add my stars first using white. Use a white color pencil or white crayon. And I'm just going to color in little circles, and I'll put them randomly wherever I want. Use a crayon or a color pencil. Crayon or color pencil. Now even put some here in these little spaces in between. Remember, these stars are supposed to be little, okay? All right, so there are my stars. Next is her, let's see, next I will do yellow. The lights on our bridge, okay? And I'm going to color those in with yellow. Some of them have little lines on the inside. I'll erase that. And now Faith Ringgold, once again, she's still alive. She's still making art, and her artwork was really popular as a protest art during the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, okay? She used her art to speak for her. She used her art to protest about women's rights and how women should be treated more equally, but especially, Black and African American women. She used her artwork as a form of protest. She even protested a art museum. Like, she had picket signs and she marched around the museum because the museum did not showcase a lot of women's artwork. It mostly showcased men's artwork, and she thought, okay, well, women artists should be included as well. So she used her artwork to speak for her, to protest, which is really cool. It's another type of story, right? Using artwork to protest. Okay, so next, I'm going to use black. This is black color pencil. You can use color pencil or crayon, okay? And I'm going to outline, draw over my lines for the bridge. This is a suspension bridge, so it's using cables to keep the road up. And I'm just tracing, oh, that's okay. I'm just tracing over the lines that I made here. And this type of artwork, it's what we call a flat artwork. It's a flat drawing, and that just means that we don't have to add a lot of shadows. We don't have to make it look 3D. We can just focus on putting in the colors that we like. Maybe I'll add some little balls here. That looks cool. Okay. And then our buildings here on the bottom. Now this is a nighttime scene. Okay, so that means we may see some people in with their lights on, so I'm going to use yellow and color a few little rectangles here, and these would be random. Every light doesn't have to be on, but I'm making a few rectangles on my buildings, and you can use yellow or white to make these rectangles. Yellow or white. And when you're using the yellow or white, it may be hard to see on the white paper, and that's fine, because the technique that we're using, it will, once we paint over our coloring, all of those different colors that we used with the color pencil will pop. So one of the last steps here will be the painting. And as you do this, think about what colors you want your buildings to be. Okay, so next we have our girl or a person here. You can make this a girl or a boy, it's up to you. But here, my person is a girl. So I'm going to use the color pencils to color in her face. Once again, it does not have to be super realistic. The artist, Faith Ringgold, her work was not realistic. It was more cartoony. It was flat. It had bright pops. It has bright pops of color. And I remember she did all of this on a quilt, on fabric. Now, I only drew one person. If you wanted to draw more than one person, 2 people, maybe your family, into this story quilt, you can. There's her hair, her braids. I want her ribbon to be white. Now, even spaces that you want to be white, for this technique, you have to color them white. Okay? You have to color them white. Okay, and I want her dress will be orange. Now, as you've been drawing this, you may think, okay, I made this mistake. What am I going to do? If you made that mistake using a regular pencil, then erase it. If you made that mistake using maybe the color pencil, you can always use another color pencil to color on top of it. Or you can just leave it and we're going to use a marker later on to outline our work. So you can use some marker to sort of cover it up. Just filling this in, her little hair bows with white. Now, if you are not familiar with Faith Ringgold's work, feel free to do a search for her. It's Faith, F-A-I-T-H, and her last name is Ringgold, like a ring you put on your finger, and gold, like the color gold. So it has 2 G's in it. Okay, I'm gonna just outline some of these buildings with different colors that I want to use. Just the tops and the sides, not all of it. So that one's going to be green. This one's going to be brown. That one's going to be brown too. Make that one brown. My red. Full red. Let me get another red here. Ooh, here's a fresh red. This one's going to be a red brick building. And I think this one will be purple, maybe. Why not have a purple building? Purple building. And here's a blue building. Okay, so I've colored the tops of my buildings, and now I think I'm ready to paint the sky here. Okay, now is the time to pull out your watercolors. Now, my watercolors are a little old, and sometimes they get mixed together. All right. Okay, so I got some fresh water here. Fresh water for my watercolors. And I'm using this large paintbrush here. It's a little bit smaller than my thumb. And I'm just going to wake up this blue. Put some water on my paintbrush. And this will be the color of the sky, the night sky. So I will show you this technique, and then I will leave it to you to add the colors that you like, okay? Add the colors that you like. I'm showing you this technique, and then you use the colors that you like to finish this painting. Don't feel rushed to finish this painting all right now along with me, because I've done this before. This is your first time, maybe. So what you'll see, some of those dots that I made with the white are sort of popping through. I'm just adding more water to my watercolor. And what I like about this is this is called a resist. So what's happening is the crayons or the color pencils that we use, they are resisting the watercolor. So we can still see the lines of our bridge. We can still see the some of our stars coming through. Now you can only do this with watercolors. You can't do this with like tempera or acrylic paint. It's not going to work. You need watercolor. You can see some of the stars. Now, if you think your stars aren't really showing through, then draw a little bit, color a little bit harder with the white, or if you have crayons, use your crayons to color in those stars some more, and then it'll really pop. So I'm making sure I'm not getting paint inside of my buildings just yet, because I want the buildings to be different colors. can see some of the stars. Adding more water to my watercolor paint. And I'm painting inside of this rectangle inside of the frame. Take your time to get in between there. And you can switch paintbrushes to a smaller paintbrush if that works for you. Uh-oh. There we go. Sorry. Okay. Now, if you messed up on some of this, that's fine. What I'm going to do a little bit later is go back over it with a Sharpie to sort of define some of those edges that I lost. Ooh, that looks so cute. Once again, this does not have to be super realistic, okay? All right, so now I'm going to color or paint in the buildings that I have. I'm just washing off my paintbrush now. Washed it off, have clean water on it. I'm going to jump into that green. Paint my building green. Now, what really makes artwork like this pop is the more color that you use and filling in the white spaces. Filling in the white spaces. That makes it look much more intentional. So every single white space that you see that was not intentional, okay, fill it in with color. And next I'm using this orange. I'll wake it up, adding some water to it. Okay, next I have a purple, washing off the paintbrush, and there's a purple. I believe there was brown. Washing off my paintbrush, going to pick up some brown. Okay, I think that building's supposed to be blue. messed up. That's green. Okay, now it's blue. There we go. Okay, so here, these two rectangles, those are the legs of my bridge. So I'm just going to fill those in with a little bit of black. Maybe this too. Ooh, why not all the way up? There we go. That looks really good. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to fill in my shapes here on the side with, and remember these shapes are a part of the story quilt, okay? So these can be any colors that you like, but I'm going to leave this rectangle here. I'm going to leave that empty because I want you all to fill in your own story. That means writing it in later on. Okay, so before I do that, let me just outline my girl here. And my watercolor is dry in that area, so it's not messing up my marker. And just adding an outline just makes her really pop. And remember, only do this once you're completely satisfied with how she looks, because you cannot erase the Sharpie. There are the curls, the braids in her hair. Mouth, eye, hair. Once again, you do not have to make this super realistic because Faith Ringgold's artwork is not super realistic. Okay? It's more like a cartoon. It's playful. It's childish. All right. We're leaving this square empty so we can add our own story. And now I'm going to paint in the fabric squares, because remember, this is a story quilt. This is a story quilt. You can speak on a experience that you had, like Faith Ringgold did, or a dream, or maybe you can talk about figures from Black history that you've learned about. You can say how it has affected you, how you can learn from it. Once again, you can use your own colors for this. You don't have to exactly copy mine. You can be creative. Now, this painting was based and inspired by Faith Ringgold's Tar Beach. It's a series of quilts It's also a book, so you can check out the book online or your local library. And you can take inspiration from this and illustrate your own story. Faith was telling her story of summer nights spent on the roof of her apartment building. And she dreamed of going on different adventures with her little brother. She dreamed of flying and seeing bridges, seeing construction sites, seeing monuments. And this is something you can do as well. I'm switching out my colors here. This is something you can do as well. You can create your own story, create more drawings. I think I'm going to use a little bit of red. What other stories can you add on? Now I'm painting on a easel and it's standing up, so you'll see some of my colors blending together. That's just gravity. If you are sitting flat, have your artwork flat on a table, you don't have to worry about this. What color next? No. It's yellow. Wake up some yellow. And then even if your colors mix together, and you don't want them to mix together, like here, the yellow sort of blended on top of the purple, that's fine. You can color over it with the color pencil or crayon once it's dry. Oh, yeah, look how it's blending in there. Now it's making an orange. I love that. Use it on this side too. Now you can always stop these colors from flowing by adding a barrier with a crayon. So I can get my crayon and color a line here or there so the colors don't mix. And maybe I'll do red on the other side too. Be consistent. And I'll use some orange on the top. And I want to make that a green square. Remember, these are just different patches of color, patches of cloth. All right, so there is my painting. I'm going to let it dry a little, and once I let it dry, any details I want to flesh out, I can go back with my marker and maybe add some lines in between here or there, or use my marker to fill in my own story here in the border. But yeah, I like this drawing. It'll look great. I'm gonna take the tape off. Once I take the tape off, you'll see a really clean line there. Ooh, that looks good. Okay, you'll see a really clean line, and then once you frame it, because I know your painting looks awesome, once you frame it, it'll have a nice, clean, crisp line. Okay, so come back next time. Feel free to email me or tag me in a picture send a picture of your final painting because I want to see it. All right, bye. Happy Black History Month.